everybody, it's Tyler Austin. Thank you so much for watching. Today we're going to talk about what makes the AK so reliable, the reliable design that it is. There's a lot of myths that go around about this, and we're going to clear some of this up. If you ask most people, or at least most people that are fairly familiar with firearms, what makes the AK the reliable design that it is, they're likely going to tell you it's because of loose tolerances. And this really isn't true, at least it's not the whole truth. Loose tolerances do not make a firearm more reliable. In fact, if your tolerances are too loose, then that's likely going to cause problems. Same thing on the flip side of that coin. If your tolerances are too tight, that will cause problems as well. Every proven firearm design walks a fine line between too loose and too tight in terms of tolerances. And where that fine edge is going to depend on the individual firearm and primarily the operating system that it uses, and even more so the kind of bolt that it uses, at least in terms of rifles. So for example, an AR-15 uses a star bolt and a star breech. So there's 8 locking lugs. It kind of looks like the bolt of an AR looks like a little mini cog. Those 8 locking lugs have to interface and slip inside 8 slots within the breech face in order for that bolt to properly lock up to the breech. So naturally, there's a lot of complexity to this, if you will. 8 things have to slide into 8 things in order for that bolt to properly function. So naturally, with an AR-15, for example, you can't have a lot of slop within that bolt and bolt carrier in the upper receiver, or else those 8 locking lugs will not mesh correctly. So the tolerances on an AR, especially in terms of the bolt carrier group and the upper receiver, have to be very tight. On the other hand, we have the AK that uses a 3-lug rotating bolt design. So you have 3 locking lugs. That bolt interfaces with the breech face, rotates roughly 60 degrees, and locks those locking lugs into place, which locks the bolt to the breech face. Naturally, there's a little bit less complexity to this, and as a result, the AK, at least in terms of the bolt, can get away with a little bit more slop. So is it true that the AK does have slightly looser tolerances than the AR? Yes, however, that's not what makes the AK reliable, or at least that's not the singular reason. As with many things, there's not one singular reason that makes things the way they are, and what makes the AK reliable is the same thing. However, if you wanted to put one reason to it, it would be that the Kalashnikov design, Mr. Kalashnikov, or what Jeff Kirkham of Ready Man likes to say, Team Kalashnikov, because although Mr. Kalashnikov was the main brain behind the design, he had a team behind him helping him along the way. Like I said, if you want to put one singular reason to it, it's because Mikhail Kalashnikov's design was just brilliant, if not ingenious. So if loose tolerances don't really make the AK reliable, then what does? Well, there are many reasons. I'm going to hit the top 5 here. There are more reasons than this, but these are going to be the main 5. And these are not going to be in any particular order. Number 1, the bolt and bolt carrier design. I kind of already touched on this. The AK uses a long stroke gas piston in terms of its gas system. A long stroke gas piston. This has been a proven staple of reliability for a very long time. This is why the new cool kid thing to do nowadays is to put long stroke pistons in ARs, which I find kind of funny. But regardless, there's a reason for that. It's because the long stroke gas piston has been a staple of reliability for a very long time in terms of rifles. Also, the bolt, like we already discussed, it uses a 3-lug rotating bolt design, which has also been a staple for both reliability and accuracy for a very long time. There's a myth that goes around saying that people will say that the star lug used on your AR-15 makes the rifle more accurate. This is not true. If you look at virtually every single high-end bolt-action rifle, bolt-action sniper rifle, precision rifle, whatever you want to call it, They all use either a 2 or 3 lug rotating bolt. It's been a staple, like I said, it's been a staple for both accuracy and reliability for a long time. Also, it is a delayed rotating bolt, meaning that the bolt carrier travels a certain distance. In the AK, it's roughly a ½ inch, don't quote me on that, before the bolt carrier starts to unlock the bolt and begins extracting the old case. So the bolt carrier travels about a ½ inch before it starts to unlock the bolt and extract the old casing. Basically what this does is it gives the bolt carrier a running start. It gives it inertia before it starts to rotate, unlocking the bolt and extracting the case. This gives you a running start, which aids in extraction. Next, we have ammunition, 7.62 by 39 and 5.45 by 39. This has less to do about the rifle design and more about the ammunition design. Both 7.62 and 5.45 have a relatively short casing and a heavily tapered casing. So in short, it just provides less friction inside the chamber, both during feeding and especially during extraction. Shorter and heavily tapered casings will just have less friction, especially after discharge, and that just improves reliability in terms of extraction. As compared to, let's say, 5.56, which has a very long casing and not as heavily tapered, and this naturally just means more friction inside the chamber during extraction. That's one reason why I'm not a big fan of 5.56 AKs. I'm not saying that 5.56 AKs are unreliable or they suck. Generally, they work just fine if they're built by somebody who knows what they're doing. However, you will take a little bit of a reliability hit if you go with a 5.56 AK, simply because the ammunition is a pretty major factor on what makes the AK so reliable. Next, we have linear feed angle. So the path for the cartridge between magazine and chamber is about as straight as it can get. It's a very straight line, or at least as straight as it can be. The most efficient and the fastest way from point A to point B is a straight line, and the AK does that. This is very different from a lot of firearm design, both even if you see pistols, semi-automatic pistols, and other rifles such as the M4, in which the cartridge from magazine to chamber has to travel up a feed ramp at roughly a 45-degree angle, pop up, and then go into the chamber. Naturally, there's just more steps to this and more things to potentially go wrong. So generally speaking, the more linear the feed angle, the more reliable the feeding, generally speaking. Next, we have an open receiver. So the receiver on an AK is very open, and for lack of a better term, it has a lot of extra space inside it. So any debris that gets into the receiver, there's a lot of extra space for that debris to potentially go and out of the way of the operating parts of the rifle. There's enough room inside the receiver, especially in the back of the receiver, for an empty casing to dance around and for the rifle to still function properly. Ask me how I know. Next, and at least the last on this list, certainly not least, minimal small function critical parts. So the AK, most of the operating parts on the AK are very large and very robust. The only small parts on the AK that can potentially break, taking the rifle out of action, is the firing pin and the extractor, or some part of the extractor. That's really it. All the other functioning parts of the rifle are very large, very strong, and very robust, and are not prone to wearing out. As opposed to a rifle like the AR, which has a lot of small function critical parts that are known for wearing out: gas piston or gas rings, firing pins, extractor springs, ejector and ejector components. The bolt on an AR has about a life expectancy of around about 5 to 10,000 rounds. That's about it. The life expectancy of a bolt on an AK is basically the entire life of the rifle. Um, an AK can be rebarreled 2 to 3 times, have over 100,000 rounds through the thing, and you could still be using the original bolt. Now, some of the components will probably have to be replaced, like the extractor and the firing pin. However, the bolt housing itself, you can still be original. Bolts on AK simply do not break, and they last forever. This reason alone probably makes up is probably the biggest reason why the AK has such the longevity that it has. More or less over all these other reasons, this right here gives the rifle its longevity. So that's what makes the AK so reliable. There are other reasons other than these as well. However, these are kind of the big five. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. I hope you learned something from it. If you'd like to learn more about fighting with your AK, be sure to keep a lookout for my book, Kombative Kalashnikov, that will be available on Amazon by the end of 2020. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, depending on where you're watching this. I'm Tyler Austin. Thank you so much for watching.